This limited Kintsugi Heroes podcast series was made possible through grant funding provided by the New South Wales Department of Communities and Justice Connecting Seniors Grant Program. If you'd like to find out more about Kintsugi Heroes, head over to kintsugiheroes.com.au. Welcome back to our Kintsugi Heroes special series Connecting Seniors. This year we are continuing to share the experiences of ageing Australians to create connections across our communities. In this episode of Connecting Seniors, we're revisiting a conversation from Kintsugi Heroes with a senior who is making an impact on the world by connecting with his community. This week we hear John Millam's chat with Sean Haran. Enjoy this episode.
As always, I usually say it, but I'm particularly keen to have a chat with this man who has a background in law enforcement, first responder, and not only that, then the consequences of that experience has moved into helping, in making as an advocate and working with policy and on the ground and serving those who serve us. And that's Sean Haran. Sean, welcome to Kintsugi Heroes, mate.
Yeah, thanks, John, and it's great to be here, mate. I know we sort of started this process a while ago, and it was nice to get an invitation to jump on in the new year, which we're in. And Happy New Year to yourself and all your podcast listeners. And it's a pleasure to be here, mate, to tell that.
Oh, mate, it's our privilege to have you today. Just to sort of put a coat on it. We're going to talk about the effect that being in the force and being a first responder and serving the community has on people with mental health and lives, and the challenges that brings. And also, we're going to talk about your response to your experiences. But maybe it's good to start with, like you were telling me, you are another imported asset, right? We brought you over from England again to look after us, like so many others. How did your folks just decided to come to Australia?
Yeah, look, despite my age and appearance, mate, I didn't come out with the convicts. But mum and dad's Irish, mum was English, and I grew up in Brighton in England to the age of 7 and spent a fair bit of time in Ireland and have plenty of relatives in both. And I think Dad decided that England wasn't a place for the Irish, and we headed out to the colony. So we would, the classic 10-pound poms. But what happened 5 years later is we went back, which a lot of people do, and we stayed 2 years and came back again. So I'm actually a 20-pound pom. They gave us another crack at it. And what's interesting now, mate, is I always looked at those things as an adventure. I was one of those kids that went to lots of different schools, and mum and dad moved around in housing commission and when we got here, and I always thought that was adventurous. And what I recently found with a bit of a deep dive into my life is that those things actually really affected me. Grew up in Perth, and I went off to join the Navy at 15 and a half. And they told me I was colorblind. So that was the end of my only real passion, I suppose, I had. And the only really ambition I ever had was to join the Navy, but got knocked back. Tried to go back to school, started an apprenticeship, just couldn't find myself. And then I was playing football, soccer with a mate, and he just joined the police academy. I thought, wow, that looks exciting. And that word exciting had become, for me, I was always looking for something exciting, and I didn't realise till later on why, but I'll come back to that. But I thought I'd have a crack at this, and I managed to get through the colourblind test because the old police doctor was a different breed, a different era, and instead of going through the normal test, he just took me to his library and said, "Mate, what colour's that book and what colour's that book?" And wham, I was in. So April 1978, I became a West Australian policeman, and I loved every minute of it. I did some jobs that I still remember that I not, I wouldn't say were enjoyable, but overall, I did 15 years with the cops. I was lucky enough to end up in the tactical response group, which was just a boy's own dream. I had a ball.
Just quickly on the colourblind thing, did you know you were colourblind?
I didn't when I went to join the Navy, but I did when I went to join the cops. So I just kept my fingers crossed. And the example that the naval officer gave me was that if you're on board a ship and there was a fire, you were told to go and get the brown hose, which would have water. You might have grabbed the red one, which was fuel. I walked out sort of laughing but crying, thinking, okay, that's bullshit. But anyway, I got a cop. Look, I'd love to say it never affected me, and I don't think it did, but it was probably times when, especially in my early days, I went and just found an exciting couple of years riding police motorbikes and fast cars and getting involved in chases and, prangs and fatalities and all that stuff, and maybe calling the occasional chase. I might have just set a red car, maybe it was green, who knows, but the rego was the same, so I thought it was okay.
Fair enough. Of course, you were joining at a fairly turbulent time for Western Australian police, right? It was like Western Australia was a bit of a frontier. It had maybe a little frontier attitude.
Oh, no, definitely not. And I probably realised that more when I came over here. WA, all the different tags, wait a while. I remember the number plates back in the day. WA, the state of excitement, and they try to secede from the rest of the country.
Yeah.
I first realised when I came over here and I started up a little business, and I was going back to WA to try and sell that. I was running armed robbery training for banks and credit unions, etc. And I'd go back to Perth and start talking to various people, and the first thing they say is, "Oh, you're from the eastern states, aren't you?" And it wasn't until I said, "Well, yeah, I'm living there, but I was in the cops here, and I spent part of my life." "Oh, you're okay." It was a really on us, and anything east of that border, whatever the state is, it's just the eastern states. It's WA and the eastern states, and it's just bizarre, and it really hit me when I come over here. It's a very isolated place. It's apparently the most isolated city in the world. They thrive on that, So, I joined the cops. Had a wonderful 15 years. So I joined the TRG in 1985 after the bombing, as you may not be aware, but every state, through the SACPAV agreement with the federal government, had to stand up a full-time tactical team. Many states at that time had a part-time squad, which I was a member of, and in 1985 they had to have a full-time squad stood up that could tackle counter-terrorism, etc. So very exciting times.
That we've seen it escalate these days, right? So the quasi military approach, right? So SWAT or TRG for us has really amped up its militaristic sort of profile, right? That would have been exciting as a young copper, but what are your thoughts about it now? Was it the right way to go?
Yeah, look, it was, in the sense that the police powers and military powers are very different. So, and I know there's been a lot of talk over the years, especially with Lick Cafe. What came out of that was that the military should be in, etc. At the end of the day, our legal provisions within Australia is that for domestic matters, the police are legislatively, easy for me to say, required to handle that, and that's how. But mate, I look back now, and I'm actually going to a reunion in July, 40 years from when the TRG started. And when I look at what the guys have got today in terms of equipment and their boats and their equipment, it's just incredible. When I started in '85, mate, we were handed an old green bag with a pair of green overalls and KT 26 boots, and
I remember them well.
World War II gas mask, and there wasn't much. You know. So when you were going to jobs in those days, there wasn't much protection, but you didn't think about it because that was just that's what you had. I actually did a tour of the TRG offices last year. Went back to Perth, and I'm just blown away by. We had a locker with a bit of crap in it, and the guys now have got a cage the size of half my size of my garage, and they've got equipment, come and lift.
Well, just the body armor and everything. It's just crap, amazing.
And so they should, so they should. So see, I love those days. We were very lucky in Perth because at the time there was only one military. There's only one SAS position around the country, which was in Swanbourne in Perth. There was no, group over here. And I won't go into details, but I essentially was asked to leave the unit, and it destroyed me, John. It was just I finally found a place for me to be, and that I loved, and.
So did you feel home there? That was you mentioned being a gypsy, but that was a place that really grounded.
Yeah. For me, it was I never really got over not joining the Navy, and I felt there was something, and I didn't come from a military family or anything, but there was something within me that just felt this is my place, And I'll jump ahead a bit and I'll come back, but I didn't find out until my mid-50s I had ADHD. And it's affected my whole life, without question. And a lot of people say it's a super, it's something special, and it can be. It just gives you certain powers, I suppose, but it can be a real issue. And I look back now and I understand why I was asked to leave that group in a sense, because since that time I've worked in a corporate environment and I've managed people, and I could see, if I look back and it was talking about a 25-year-old, to a 25-year-old Sean Haran, I would have thought, look, this guy's good, but he's a troublemaker and he likes to bend the rules a bit, and maybe better off if he went somewhere else. I could see that now, but at the time and for many years, I was just angry about the whole thing. So I walked out of there and I tried to fight every way I could. I went and did everything I could to try and beat the system, and that's what my dad taught me, that sort of Irish, to keep the flag flying, fight the system, and I did that as best as I could. And then, 2 years later, 18 months later, I decided just to pull the pin. So I wasn't sort of boarded out medically. I made a choice to leave, setting up a new home and that sort of thing, and finding work and doing the normal things. It wasn't there, and I didn't know how to get a job. I had no idea who to go to, how to write a read. I didn't even know what I wanted to do. I could have had a crack at the cops again, but by that time I was just bitter and angry and twisted, and it was the last thing on my mind. I did apply for a couple of things, and I actually got accepted into the AMBOs. So I've spent 4 years as an AMBO then, from 94 to 98, which was interesting because I was still had a police head on, and I was trying to help people. And if I went to a situation where there was a bit of trouble going on, I'd be, drawn to the trouble rather than patient. But I was also trying to build up a business, and the struggle I had with that first 18 months was I had nothing. No idea, no contacts, no networks over here. And I'll come back to that because that was part of why I'm doing what I'm doing now with Beyond the Badge, because I totally understand where people are in that transition period.
One of the things I noticed, like with AMBOs and police, or the first responders generally, is it has that tribe element to it, right? And that's really important because that tribe, for the need of other services and supports, right? Often you can't take it home to your family, or there's not a lot of general sort of understanding from the community. So you have to stick together to deal with the consequences of the job. Was that like when you talk about thinking about what you do next. That must have been a challenging transition for you.
Mate, I'll tell you what, I was just talking to my wife about this last night. Probably the biggest thing for me is I didn't just leave the cops. I left my home. I left my, mum and dad. Dad was still alive. I had brothers and lots of mates, and I came to it almost. I might as well have gone to a new country. I knew nobody other than Julie, and I've struggled even now. I just started playing golf this last couple of years, and I'm playing with a bunch of older guys, and man, I'm loving it because I'm reconnecting with normal people. And it's taken me a long, long time to reconnect again. I tried to go and join a soccer club when I was here early, and I came home and Julie said, "How'd you go?" And I think I pretty much said, "Man, they're a bunch of dickheads. They're probably great people, but they weren't my tribe." I didn't get them, and I didn't think they got me. So I've really struggled over these years to make good friendships. I've got lots of work colleagues I've ended up with, and people I can go to, but I've really struggled with that sort of deep mateship. So my best mates, other than one, are still back in WA, who I don't talk to a lot and maybe catch up with occasionally. But that's been a real hard thing for me, is leaving that tribe and trying to find another one. It's a really challenging thing, and I think that's why you tend to try and hang around those people. Yeah, so that was, to be honest, mate, that was a real challenging thing for me, and in some ways still is. As I say, I'm only just reconnecting with people again after all this time in a friendship sense, just by playing golf.
There's in my mind, like doing, talking to so many people and some of the work I do in men's health, I see like that aspect of disconnection with peers and the depth of our friendships as a real issue, right? Where, do you think the job also creates barriers, right? That's, that whole idea of not talking about stuff deeply or putting it aside or disassociating from those tough days, maybe even, having a few beers and then, sleeping it away. Does that, is that part of it? Is that necessary if it has its cost, or is it something we could change?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I would say, I've probably got two parts of me these days. I've got the old Sean Haran that joined the cops and went through all that in the early days here, and I've kind of got a new version of me now through a whole range of things that have happened to me and through the charity, that I think a little bit differently about things. If I was talking to a younger police person now, I would encourage them to, that bond is incredibly important for you, but I would encourage you to maintain a circle of friendships outside as well, and maybe that's changed with the current sort of generation. I'm not sure, but it certainly was an important part, because you do tend to realise that not many people understand what you do and don't actually want to. You go to a barbecue and they want to hear some worries, and they want to complain about a parking ticket or something, but they don't really want to know about the stuff you do day to day. And I was having this conversation over a beer after golf yesterday with a bunch of guys, and saying that, I've done some pretty nasty jobs, and someone's got to do them. In fact, one of the guys' daughters is a paramedic, and he was saying she comes home and talks about stuff. And, the answer is someone's got to do this work. We've got to have a military, we've got to have police, got to have paramedics and fireys, but they're not things that, you go into things that human beings shouldn't see and shouldn't do, but they've got to be done until we could find a different way. So I'm not sure we've got better at dealing with it, both on an individual level and on an organisational level. I know some things have improved, and a lot of agencies talk about what they're doing. I'm not always seeing that evidence on the ground. I think there's a long way to go to have that real understanding and support of people, when they finish their service, and how to manage them. And we're still not there yet. There's a long way to go.
Yeah, well, the Royal Commission into Veteran Affairs and so on has been pretty tough talking about what isn't there yet. What guys who are serving and post service have to go through just to feel safe and to feel supported.
Yeah, and look, I think one of the positive things out of that for us as police and first responders is Nick Caldis was involved in that, and I know he's sort of come back and saying to himself, "Hey, a lot of this stuff is same for police." Being a former deputy commissioner, so I'm sure that some of his learnings in that and findings will also, move on to the police and first responder field as well. And I'm hoping that will happen, just to try and get things moving along in a better way.
And related to that, I'm sure you've encountered, as you go back and you create education and support through the charity. So, we go on a journey of learning as well, right? So, what have you learned that is, that you wish was around when you were in that space where you were just sort of without any backup, really?
Yeah. But I think the most important thing now that I would, again, my advice to anyone joining the police or any first responder agency or even the military would be, it's more likely than not that you're not going to have a 30, 40-year career. It's less likely nowadays that you go right through. So at some point you're probably going to hop off that bus and look and be looking for something else. My advice now would be at some point in time, and again, this could be an organisational thing to help people move on. Some point in time, start preparing yourself for the future. Find something within the job. And a great example, and not everyone wants to be a prosecutor, but that's a good example. If you had your fun, did your whatever 5 years, 10 years, and then you got into prosecuting, potentially the organisation pays for a law degree, that kind of thing. What a great way to re-enter the workforce as a solicitor trained by the police, and that's probably the perfect example. But there's many other things you can do nowadays that would help you move on. So finding something, for me, again, probably driven by the ADHD was, just whatever I was doing, I didn't have an ambition in the cops, John. I just loved it. I went from fast bikes, fast cars to, run around with guns and drinking down the sergeant's mess. So that was kind of just an exciting, but I never thought about the future. Now, we both had this is the big lesson, John, for me and for today is, out of really struggling after my service, and Simon the same, we both found ourselves in new work opportunities. That's what kept us going, and we found our value again. And that's why this, I guess this idea for the charity came along. So, and I was just doing a bit of consulting work. I was a bit lost again then. It was almost like history repeating itself. I'd done something for 25 years and lost my tribe again. And Simon was he was doing some stuff, but not completely fulfilled. And then tragedy struck. He a very close, I might mention names, but a very close mate of Simon's who he'd worked with in the TIU here, had got out. He'd been in the military as well. He got out and tried a bit of work, ended up working at a retirement village, and he was really struggling. And he took his life. He left a wife and two beautiful little kids. And so Simon went down the coast to the funeral and the wake with all the boys, and they were sitting around, and they made a commitment, or Simon made a commitment that, we can't let this continue to happen, so I've got to do something about it. So he came back and had an idea and went to Police Legacy in Sydney and said, look, what are you guys doing for, people who are struggling? We know that you look after them when they pass away, but who's doing anything for those who are getting out or trying to get out and living, but struggling. And there was some little things going on, but not a lot. So he grabbed me and said, mate, why don't we try and put something together? So we put together what was essentially then a 5-day program, which we call a career transition program, but it was really, through our own understanding and connection, knowing what people needed and how they were feeling. It's getting people together for 5 days and working through how they feel, what they're going to need, who to connect with, how to continue to connect with us when they finish the program. And yeah, that's right now, mate. And it's been, to be honest, the love I had for the cops when I was there, I've now got for the charity and the work we're doing, because I'm reconnecting with my original tribe, and that's been a great thing too. But I'm doing it in a positive way, and I'm not getting sort of bogged down in going to work and having those events. I'm actually external to that and providing a help end for those who are trying to make the move out.
There's a couple of things I'd like to go dive into, if it's all right. First of all, you mentioned PTSD, and your experience of it. Like PTSD, is the consequence of our management of trauma in many ways, right? And how that goes on and has impact. What do you think is the job inherently dangerous that way? And why isn't this part, why isn't, if there was a problem in the operation side, the force would move to fix the operational manual and, training and so on. So why are the individuals expendable at the damage that's done mentally? Why is this such a problem to grasp?
Look, it's a great question. I'm not sure I have the answer, but I have my own views, and I think, again, because Simon's got into that safety space, and part of my responsibilities at companies like DHL was to have that safety lens as well. And at the end of the day, there's certain things you go through. If you're in an industry and you identify that there's hazards, there's certain processes you go through to reduce those hazards. Now, when you think about it, when you join the police force and are at the police academy, they will teach you things that will keep you safe as best as can be. They'll teach you how to talk to people, how to stand, where to stand, how to set up, and then the escalation. If it does, go pear shaped. Here's the force continuum, etc. All that stuff. It's a no brainer. How to drive a car, fast. All those things are no brainers because this is your daily work. Well, hello, we know historically the data is there that in some point in time you are more likely than not to suffer from a trauma, be exposed to trauma, and more likely to not have some mental health condition arise. So and the thing with the whole safety spectrum is if it's foreseeable, or likely, foreseeable, then we need to deal with it. But we seem to get away. I say agencies still seem to get away with the fact that it is entirely foreseeable that it's a no-brainer. You're going to be exposed to traumatic events. It's more likely than not, you're going to have some repercussion from that. Why the hell can we still get away without really, even at the academy level, you should be at that point in time told about what might happen, and here's how we're going to deal with it. Whether that's weekly, monthly check-ins, quarterly psych, whatever it is, we're still not there yet. Why the hell now in 2024 can we still not say to someone, John, thank you for your service, shake your hand, you've put your life on the line for your state, your country, we're now going to help you move on, rather than making it hard, legally challenging the fact that you might have or you have post-traumatic stress, going down a legal course of action to say, hang on, we don't believe that you've got that from the job. Are you kidding me? We're still not there with all that. So or at least feeling better about the future, that, hey, you can do this. Here's a heap of examples of, Simon and I and others that we use to show that you can do it. You can do this, and there is a future, and it will look different, and it will be different, but you can still be satisfied with it. You can still have a great life and enjoy going to work. That's the next phase of your life. It's not over when you leave the cops or the military or the services. It's a part of your life, and be proud of it. Bring those skills with you because they're absolutely transferable. Learn how to talk about them in a different way, and move on. And that's what we try and do. That's what the back up beyond the badge is about.
Fantastic, mate. And it's I love the logistics, the approach. From an ADHD guy, fellow ADHDer. To come in, to set up a logistics and routine organisation is pretty in your face. I like that. Do you think, Simon Sinek talks about leadership as being serving those who serve others, right? And that's what I'm seeing. You're offering leadership to back into that force, but purpose has creates that environment for engagement, lack of distress, resilience, and so on. Is that what do men self-select for these kind of roles? Do you think, it's that need for purpose and for service?
Oh, absolutely. I think, men, women, all others. I have my own theory about not only about the service bit, but I think, those who end up going into, special forces or tactical teams and that, the average punter would say, who would honestly stand in front of a door knowing there's someone inside with a firearm that's beam firing? Who would stand there and, kick that door, knock that door, blow that door and run in? Who in their right mind does that stuff, my own little theory is that I think you're kind of predisposed to, and for me, it's probably the ADHD brain that chases that excitement, but also doesn't think about the consequences. We're very good at compartmentalizing things, so you can be there with the excitement buzz, running through, going, "Wow, I'm running around with a firearm, and look at me, going to kick this door in." And the bit that someone a person with a normal brain would go, "Well, hang on, you could get shot when you go through that door." You'd put that, you compartmentalize that, and that could be a thought afterwards if you have a near miss or something. But it's just so I think there's a certain brain that chases that sort of thing. That thank God there is, because we need people to do that stuff. I think the ability for us and other agencies themselves to try and sell those things. We're about to embark on a video exercise with a company that's I'll name them actually because they help with the Vid Zero, they're called, and they're providing a free video promotion for 100 charities, and that's part of their corporate they're doing. And so we're about to embark and put together a video, which we've done videos before, but they're focused on the first responder. This is more about employers saying, "Hey, how great these people are, and the success they bring, the value they bring." So that's really exciting. And that this year, 2025, is going to be a real push to try and educate the world, certainly the world in Australia, about the value of employing first responders and police and the value they can bring. Put aside the stigma you think's there, but look at the value they can bring. So that's our mission here.
What a fantastic approach! The power of lived experience, the power of bringing that to turning what people have traditionally seen as an issue into a strength-oriented approach. Yeah,
absolutely. We got so many great examples of those who have done it already. So it's there's some good data there already.
As you said, a no-brainer, right? So I'm interested just on a personal perspective, with your coming out of the services and you refocusing and finding new purpose each time, and then sort of the journey you had with PTSD and the results, right? That has, it has an impact on your everyday. What was that? What did that journey mean for you? What has PTSD added to your world?
Yeah, look, it's an interesting question. I can honestly, I was thinking about this before we kicked off, just going over some stuff this morning in my head. But I think for me, and again, I think it's important to understand that everyone's journey with this is very different. I think for me, I've had more of a challenge with the ADHD than the PTSD. I would consider myself on a scale of, PTSD sufferers, down the bottom. How it first came to light for me was the first few years I was over here, and I was waking up in the middle of the night having these recurring dreams where I was being stabbed and attacked, and I still get that anger, and I still be in the car even at my age now, and someone will push in on, and I've got to really calm myself down. I think that's for me. I don't so much struggle with the typical PTSD symptoms anymore. I'm pretty good. I as I say, you live with it, but it doesn't really affect my life. And even with the ADHD, I've learnt over the last few years to change the way I behave and think about things. So, I think with the effort and with time, and certainly with some good professional help, these things become, they're still on your medical record, they're there as a tag, but they can become less and less overbearing on your life if you've got other things that are important. And I think, again, that idea of having a role where you can get up and go to work, or whether you work from home or go to work, and have a purpose. And the busier you can be with purpose, whether that's family, work, the less, you sort of focus on this stuff. And it's the worst, and this is the worst thing too with a system, is that when you put your hand up with it, the system sort of almost pushes you into the sitting at home house for 5 years, which is the worst thing that you can do. The system almost manages it that way, that, don't go and get anything because it'll show, you've got solicitors giving people advice. Don't even walk out your front door and get out of a letterbox, because it will show you've got some capacity. It'll reduce your pain, all this crap, it's just pushing people further down that hole, instead of getting out and finding purpose again and getting your life back on track, because that will help. We affect people's mental health in a positive way by finding a new life and purpose as a positive effect.
That's right. None of these things are in isolation. What you're having one side of things, your logistics, your physical world, your physical health, your financial health, your relationship health. Having them, you're working on them, also impacts the rest of your mental health and resilience. So, yeah, and I love. It's interesting. You talked about the way you describe it. There's an operational debrief after every job, after every action, and yet there's there's not that emotional or psychological debrief. It seems like it's a glaring miss, but for some reason we want to get into argument about people feeling bad instead of helping it, and cutting it off at the knees. And of course, the cost of it can be as serious as men's lives, as he described.
Yeah, look, we've got to be careful to say here that there's none of it. There certainly is, and it's. I know it's got better over the years. I mean, our debriefs were usually, on the way back to the office, job someone to grab a carton, but at least we'd sit around and talk about the job. Nowadays it has got better. There is support. There's peer support groups. There is psychologists available. I think a lot of the challenge is, you can't always make this stuff compulsory, so it's still often up to the individual. Men, and I will be gender specific here. Men specifically still have that, hesitance to go and seek help because there's a fear of weakness. And again, one of the biggest challenges here, even in 2024, is you're working in a local area command or a specialist group, and your life's being affected by it. But you look around at your mates and you think, oh, they're all doing okay. If I put my hand up, I'm going to get named as a weak link. My career will be over. I can't live with that, so I'll just bash on. And that's the other problem is if you had the confidence that when you put your hand up, you were going to get good help and be redirected back to all that sort of thing. But the fear is if I put my hand up, I'm buggered. I won't put my hand up. So it continues. That's one of the other challenges. So got a long way to go.
What are your key recommendations for blokes who have been in the service or just left? What will you offer them?
Yeah, look, I think that what I say to everyone is one, the fact that there's no cost here with our program is we're not going to do you any harm. It's the first rule of a medical, even a paramedic, do no harm, or first do no harm. I think that's the same with Beyond the Badge. If you come on our program, it's not going to do any harm to you. You will gain some valuable information, advice, whether you use it or not. That's entirely up to you. There's no pressure to go and get a job. And we've still got a few people who did the program back in 2018. They're not at work yet for a whole range of reasons, and that's okay. So there's no pressure to get a job. We're not going to ring you in a week and say, "Hey, John, where are you, mate? Come on, we got stats to keep up. You need to get a job within 6 months." No, we don't care. It's activities important though. We'd like you to be doing something, but we don't press you. We don't report back to any organisation. We're entirely independent. You'll walk away from the program with a different sense of what the future might look like. I think that's the most important thing. When and where you use that is entirely up to you. So, knowing after 2.5 days that, wow, on Monday, I thought my work life was over and my life's stuffed, and now it's Wednesday, and I realised through these guys that I know how to do it now. When I'm ready, I can reach out to them. They'll help me and hold my hand, connect me with people, and there's a good chance I'll find something meaningful. And if not, I'll find something else. And, often that first job's not the right one, and that's okay. It's making it start. And again, everyone's got, don't be fearful of being judged by your next step because, mate, I'll still have this ambition of maybe doing a couple of days of Bunnings before I fully. Others want to jump into that big dollar corporate gig, and that's fantastic. And others just want to do a bit of part-time or even volunteering. There's plenty of options out there, but it's just to get back involved, find a purpose again, and that's what we can help you with.
That's awesome. Just a thought as we sort of wrap things up. The future of policing, right? Like you're talking about the consequences of past policing and where it is now, right? Things are improving, and people are recognising some of the challenges. But it's interesting. There's the way things are done is being challenged. There's new technology. Will we all have chips? And will the police be a robot like RoboCop or whatever? What are you seeing as the trends?
Mate, I'll tell you something from before I finished up at Australia Post. I went to a meeting with some, I won't name them, but there was 4 or 5 federal agencies involved, and it was the topic was crime in the next 10 years. And now, bearing in mind, this was probably 5 years ago, so it's already 5 years. And again, they talked about traditional, policing. Either you get a complaint or become aware of let's say, a crime occurring. You, through various means, you make inquiries with that, and most of those are, feet on the ground type stuff, and then interviewing, putting statements together, gathering evidence, and then putting someone before a court, that type of thing. So then they moved and said, right, in 10 years' time, this is kind of what we see as how the world will be. And you'll still get you'll get your broken ends things, and you'll get that stuff, and obviously domestic violence, which is a scourge in our country. For example, you will have it was something like 80-90% of crimes may never be actually solved because the offender will never be found, because they're sitting, at a desk in Azerbaijan or somewhere, and it's online. And we're starting to see this now. And their identity may never be found. And then trying to sort out, even if they are found, jurisdictions, if they have committed offence against someone sitting in Sydney, and they're in a country, in the back of Russia somewhere, what's the chances of any sort of prosecution? And unless you've got some sort of global law enforcement agency that can take action, it's horrendous. And then giving the example of someone sitting somewhere in the world, who's able to delve in and take $1 out of, a million people's bank accounts where they would not even notice or make a complaint. Suddenly you've scored yourself $1 million and probably no follow-up. So that type of stuff is what we're seeing. And we know that there's people sitting in rooms around the world working for gangsters, and who were just putting out all this stuff online to try and track people and pretend they're rich 25-year-old males, and sending all this stuff to middle-aged, older-aged single women, and getting them getting their fortunes delivered in bank. It's just horrendous, and it's starting now. So that's where that sort of crime law enforcement is going at a big scale. Yeah, there'll still be boots on the ground, but I think that's where things are heading.
So the future of policing is the blokes we used to call nerds who are now running the place. Right?
Yeah, so there's some really, and look, again, if people have the interest, and I think again, most police have that sort of inquiring mind. That whole idea of cybersecurity, and that's going to be a big post for the future. And I think you can teach people how to work the computer side of things. What you can't teach graduates and young kids is having that inquiring mind and looking at something and going, well, not quite right. Let me look further into that, and let me look into it to the point where I'll find the root cause. That's what police have, and I think. A lot of military people get into that cybersecurity space, and that's great. But I think my view is that, police having that inquiring mind that are going to do really well in that space. And again, we've got some great connections with some great people doing some good work in that space. And anyone interested, that's not a bad place to be looking at for the future.
And Sean, what are you looking forward to in the next year?
Yeah. Oh, that's an easy one, mate. Getting my golf handicaps down.
Oh, man. All that great work and you ruin it with golf. I don't know.
It's, the hardest thing for me with golf has been, most of the things I've done in my life, it's go hard, hit it hard, smash it, It's taken me, I've only been really playing a couple of years, but it's taken me 18 months to start to realise the finesse and the, don't grip it so hard, don't hit it so hard. It's the way to go. And when I do play a nice shot, I go, wow, that's, I've got to tell myself to slow down and hit it softer. But I grab that thing and like I'm going to bring a snack and smash it.
It's so a lot of useful regulation and learning skills of.
Apparently, there's a lot of rules in golf, and I don't know many of them, but anyway. But probably the other thing, mate, is just continuing to build beyond the badge and getting a better connection and better pathways with companies and organisations and government to find better pathways for employment. That's my big goal this year.
Yeah. Well, it's an incredibly worthy and purposeful aim you have. I think it's so necessary, and the work that you guys are doing is just wonderful. So I'd take my hat off and wish you well. And on behalf of Kintsugi Heroes, mate, thank you so much for a great chat.
Thanks, mate. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Connecting Seniors. a Kintsugi Heroes special series. If you enjoyed this conversation, share the podcast with a friend and let us know by leaving a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to support Kintsugi Heroes and the stories we share, head to kintsugiheroes.com.au and follow the instructions to make a tax-deductible donation. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week.